All right, yeah.
Hi, everyone. We're here to talk about The Book Thief, which looks backwards on here. And I'm Gail, and behind me is Laura.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
And I have some questions for you.
Sorry, Gail. We'll
yes.
wait just a couple minutes and give people a chance to log on.
Okay, sounds good. We'll give you time to log on.
So one thing that I always like to remind everyone, we are today talking about pages 138 through 274. Let me make sure I'm doing it right.
Here somewhere too.
276, sorry.
Yes.
Of The Book Thief. So make sure that if you've read beyond that point that you're keeping this a spoiler-free space on Edmodo. We want to make sure that people that haven't read ahead have a chance to not be spoiled in their experience of this wonderful book. So like I said on Edmodo, if you want to go ahead and say hi, respond to the post that I have on there, let us know that you're logged on and ready to go with this chat, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes to give everyone a chance to join in.
One way that I looked at the book when I was planning for this was the sections of the book that are included in pages 138 to 276 are Enter the Struggler all the way up to Sketches. So those are the sections. And it starts with Max sitting in the dark and Hunt's coming to help him.
Okay, and we might be running into some of those technical difficulties that I was talking about.
Oh, so they're not seeing me?
Possibly.
Uh-oh.
So, for some reason my computer's freezing now.
Says one viewer.
Oh, okay. Let me just ask them. They're finally caught up. Let me try clicking on YouTube. We went through this last time. I hosted the video chat and I had to create a whole new video.
Yeah?
For it. So let me see.
They have a yellow live button over here.
Yeah, I'm seeing if this is loading up all right. My Wi-Fi is being very slow. It's trying to load, and then we'll see. So if you want to start asking, just kind of start talking about some of the basic points. And then I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm going to just start talking, and we're going to hope that this is working. This is, again, time to talk about The Book Thief. And some of the things that really struck me about The Book Thief were how normal life joys and struggles continued despite the horrible circumstances surrounding Liesel. And the vivid visuals I could see throughout the story, from the mayor's wife's library to Rudy to Papa and Rosa Max, the basement, the snow, more. Everything, you could really see it. The humor and the love, even death is funny sometimes. And Papa Hans, Max, and even Mama Rosa are such warm characters. And I was going to share, too, that the author, I looked up a little bit about him, and he's already become a real innovative and poetic novelist. And in addition to The Book Thief, he published 4 previous books. One of them, called I Am the Messenger, was the recipient of the 2006 Prince Honor. And he lives in Sydney. So I thought that was interesting. So I personally love to read, and that's part of why I said yes to this. I can go anywhere in the world or in the universe with a book. I can explore and learn about new things and have experiences I wouldn't have had otherwise. So on to the specifics about this. One of the things that's really central right now is Max coming into their world. And that is for them solid evidence that World War II is real. Up until this point, it hasn't really hit their lives as much. So what do you think of Death as a narrator and his interjections within the text? Why is Death a central figure in this story? What do you think about that? I'll give you time to kind of think about that, and we can continue talking about other things that are interesting about this book. I read it only once after having seen the movie, and today I reviewed the section that I'm talking about and saw two new things that I never noticed the first time through. So there's so much in this book that just amazes me. So does it seem like we're on?
We are on. So
All right.
Good, Gail.
Good. So I'll pose another question to you, one that really kind of hit me. When Max paints over Mein Kampf and makes his own book, do you see symbolism in that act? What does that make you think about? I noticed, they title the sections of the book, the chapters, The Struggler and The Struggler Continued and so on. And Mein Kampf is my struggle. So I thought that was interesting too. But do you have any thoughts about him painting over and then the words from Mein Kampf kind of bubble through the white paint, and you can even see some of the words. You can see Mein Kampf clearly in some of the pages of the book that Max writes. So what might that be about? And I had alluded to this earlier, but all the colors in the book. Did you notice all the colors? The white sky, the sky was yellow and rolling. The horizon was the color of milk. A dead man with a yellow face, brown spit-stained door. We know where that came from earlier in the book. Gray and brown summer light, orange and red in the fire, blue sky, yellow sun. And then something I didn't notice the first time, and maybe you all did, that all this color and all of this, some dingy colors, some pretty bright colors, and then Papa Hans is a painter by trade. So that just kind of hit me. And also I'll ask you if you have questions or things that you want to post, comments for me or questions for me, please do so. And of course, responses to any of this, if it's making you think of anything, I think other people might be interested too. Another question that I have is, what do Liesl and Max have in common? The two of them really kind of evolve into quite a friendship. What kinds of things do they have in common? I'll tell you my thoughts in a little bit here. I'm just going to kind of throw out some of these questions. And what gift did Liesl give Max that prompted him to write her this 13-page illustrated book, The Standover Man? Did you like the book? Was that a part of this book that you thought was pretty interesting? And I know the first thing that they shared was sharing what they dream of. That was kind of something that she hesitantly asks him, what do you dream of when you have your nightmares? Here's what I dream of, and they share that. And then, of course, later she brings him newspapers with crosswords, and they share books and laughter. And then the final gift she gives him is the weather. But there's a gift she gives him right before he writes The Standover Man, and it happens to be her birthday.
So Brooke has responded to a couple of
questions,
Gail.
Okay.
She really likes Death as a narrator in the book. She thinks it makes it more interesting and a little deeper than if they had just had one of the characters narrating. And then she also responded to Max painting over the pages of Mein Kampf. And she wrote that, "I think it is an act that shows that he doesn't care about Hitler and his rules." And just to give everyone a bit of background on Mein Kampf, it is actually Hitler's autobiography that he wrote for himself. And Mein Kampf translates in German to mean in English, "my struggle," which really relates to the chapters that we have about Max. Like Gail said, they're entitled The Struggler.
Yes.
So it's very interesting that the author has created this parallel between Max's character, the struggler, and Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler's My Struggle account of his life. So kind of an interesting twist that the author throws in there, and something to really think about. What does it mean that Max is the struggler in our story, and what he calls is his savior, this book of Mein Kampf? I think he refers to it as his savior on page, 157. He refers to it as his savior. So what does that mean for the story that Hitler, this terrible person that has affected his life so negatively, can be considered his savior in this book?
And I wondered, I was kind of sitting in rapt attention when Liesel keeps drumming up the courage to ask Max, is Mein Kampf good? Is it good? And what is Max going to say? You know, he's been in this dark hole for so long because of Hitler, and has to live in their basement, and all of his family, and you know, all the people that he knows that have died or been tortured or struggled, and they're not, you know, he begins to feel that he isn't worthy, and that some of what Hitler is saying is true, and it's pretty horrible for him, the impact of what Hitler has done. And yet when she asks him the question finally and gets the courage to ask him, is it good, he replies with, it's yes, it's really good, it saved my life. So that's, you know, kind of his take on the book. And then when it turns into and morphs into this wonderful story for Liesel, when he paints over the words, and yet they're not really gone. It's still part of his life, and it's still part of her life, and it's part of all their lives. So,
which is kind of very telling in that the title of the book itself is My Struggle. You can think about all of these bad things that happen in any one person's experience. And even if you might heal from them, you might be able to move on with your life, there's always going to be shades of those included in your experience, in your struggle. So that definitely is a huge piece of symbolism that we encounter in the book. And we have a couple more responses from Megan and Zach about painting over the pages. Megan says she thinks it was an awesome act that Max did, since he was defying Hitler and really doing this.
Yeah.
And then Zach also said it was a bold act for him to take. And then Zach also agrees that Death is a great narrator. It's nice to have his viewpoint in the book. And Gail, what do you think about that? Did you like having this omniscient narrator in there?
I actually did. I wasn't sure I was going to at first, but I liked the little interjections that Death makes, and some of them are really dark, and you know, really showing that Death is talking about taking the souls, and you know, this person bumps into him and he didn't know that the next day he was going to die, and you know, those kind of things were pretty dark. But then sometimes Death is kind of funny, I thought, and maybe I have a dark sense of humor. So any of you can post whether you ever saw any humor in Death as a narrator, or if you thought it was kind of crude, or you know, that he was a bit too dark, or you know, what your thoughts are about that. I'd be interested to know. And I guess I wanted to also just add, when I was asking the question about Liesel, the gift that I thought that she gave him right before he wrote The Stand Over a Man was that she hugged him, because he had nothing to give her, and he was just standing there feeling so helpless. He wanted to do something kind for her. She had, you know, talked to him about his nightmares, and really she's the first person he opened up to about that. And so he just really felt small and wanted so badly, and that's what motivated him to paint over the book and give her that as a gift. So I thought that was pretty special.
And Brooke responded actually to that question about the gift. You had also followed up with that saying, why was this act important for their relationship?
Yes.
And Brooke says it deepened their complicated relationship, and the gift that Liesl gave him was the gift of support.
Aww.
So she was right on there with you.
Yay. And I guess one other thought that I had was, when he does the standover man, he draws himself like a bird. So why do you think he did that? What motivated him or prompted him to make himself into the image of a bird in the standover man?
And Zach has a question for you.
Oh, good.
He wants to know who your favorite character is so far and why.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
That's hard. Probably Hans. I love so many of the characters, but Hans was so brave, Papa Hans, to go and support this son of his friend who taught him to play the accordion. And I just think his courage was amazing. And there are other parts of the book that show his courage, but in this part, he, goes to Max and keeps his promise. He is warm and soft. He is the savior of Liesl when she first comes to their home, because Rosa is so harsh. And so I just really loved that character. But I love the childhood too of Hans or Max, Liesl and Rudy. I love the relationship that they have. It made me laugh so many times. The way they call each other names, and of course Rosa does too. So she kind of trains Liesl to get on in that world pretty well. But I think that's my favorite character. How about you? What do you all think? Who's your favorite character? I'd love to hear.
And I'll kind of jump onto that. I love the character of Hans as well, but I think more than that, I love Rudy's character. And it's because, and one of the quotes that they say in here is that Rudy kind of continues through his life as though there's no war really going on. He's not affected by this situation with Max during a large portion of the section that we're working on right now. So he is able to draw in this lightness to Liesl's life. And I love that he is just that annoying, persistent little kid that really just is always there and always wants to be a part of your life, but he has such a courageous sense of friendship as well.
Yes.
So Rudy is definitely one of my favorite characters, and just the whole Jesse Owens incident. I don't even know what to say about that. Okay, and let me see if there is.
I'll share something while she's looking at questions or comments. I had a very stern grandmother with a heart of gold. Very, very deep voice, big woman, like tall as a house, and she had a laugh that was so deep when she threw her head back and laughed, the whole house would reverberate with this laugh. And I just loved her. She was my favorite person in the whole world. So when I started reading about Rosa, I thought of my grandmother, because she was so stern with Rosa, more stern than my grandmother was, but she was so stern with her. My grandmother didn't usually swear at me. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about how their relationship evolves throughout the course of the story. And I was thinking about one situation where Papa tells Liesl not to tell anyone about Max, and he has to really make an impression on her so that she doesn't. So he tells her things that it's hard for him. He does not like how scared he's making her, and he says he's going to burn all her books and they'll take her away from him. And then she goes upstairs and Mama Rosa does something pretty special that she hasn't done before. And then it says in the book, everything was awful and everything was good too, or everything was good and awful too. So I thought that was kind of a turning point for the relationship with Rosa and Liesl. But just wonder if you have thoughts about that too.
Okay, so we have a couple more responses.
Uh-huh.
To Zach's question about favorite characters, Brooke agreed with you. She loves Hans, and she put it all in caps with multiple exclamation points. Megan really likes Rudy, so Megan, we're right on.
We got Hans and Rudy.
And Zach says that his is Max. So if you guys also want to write why those are your favorite characters, we'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah.
And then we also have a couple other responses to the question about how does Max respond to Liesel's question about Mein Kampf, is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Brooke says that she thinks it saved his life because it made him fit in more and made him less susceptible to be caught. So that this was a good book for him.
Perfect.
And then,
I agree.
Yeah, Zach said the same thing. It saved my life, is what he said. So it's going to be a good thing for him, even if the content of it isn't that great.
This is really fun to talk with you guys about this. I enjoyed this book so much. And just reading a book in isolation by yourself is never as good as talking with other people about it. So I'm getting more insights and having a lot of fun just talking with you. So thank you for that.
We have a couple more responses.
Okay.
So to why did Max draw himself as a bird in the shape of a man? Brooke said because he heard Liesel describe his hair like feathers.
Yeah.
And a follow-up question for you guys. Why do you think the author chose to have his hair described like feathers? Because he could have made it into anything. He could have described it like a mane of hair, like a lion, or...
Oh, I love that question.
Yeah, so why do you think he chose to make it like feathers? What is it about birds and feathers that that Max has in common?
I love that question. That's a good one
for you guys.
Well, I'm going to talk about Rudy a little bit because I agree that he was one of the central characters and really a very endearing, amazing character. And I was thinking about that, how all of us have friends that really impact our lives, sometimes more than we know. Sometimes in my life, looking back a year later or, a little while later, I can see how someone really made a difference in my life when maybe at the time I didn't know it as much. So I'm thinking, how is Liesel's friendship with Rudy important in her life? And there's a quote that comes to mind for me, and I'll share that in a little bit. But I did notice, and I mentioned this earlier, that life with Rudy is kind of normal and life with Max is not. But what else about Rudy? What is it about Rudy that's really important in Liesel's life? And then tied to that, how can Rudy steal and later be a giver of bread? So much good, so much evil, just add water. I love that quote. Do you see good and bad in others? Do you see good and bad in yourself sometimes? Things to think about. Any questions popping up there?
Yeah, we have a question from Brooke.
Okay.
How did it make you feel when Death said that Rudy didn't deserve to die the way he did?
I was so afraid. But I'll have other people weigh in too. As soon as I read that, I thought, oh no, what's going to happen? And then Death says, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm giving away the ending, but we all know what's going to happen anyway. And I just thought, oh, no. And I started visualizing him drowning because there's a water scene right there and the book is floating. And I think he's going to drown. And then Death says, no, not yet. He doesn't drown yet. He doesn't drown. And so I was afraid for the rest of the book until, So it just kind of makes you worried. But what are your thoughts about that too? I think that's a great question. Was that Brooke that asked that?
Yes.
Yeah, great question, Brooke. Any other comments on there?
I was also terrified when I read that line, and I actually I didn't catch it the first time that I read the book. So I'm going through and I just kind of skimmed over that, and I was like, oh, it's Death. He's talking about Rudy's eventual death later in life, and he's implying that this is inevitable for everyone, so that's going to happen eventually, and so things were shocking for me, needless to say. I don't want to spoil anything, but I mean, we all know what's coming.
I know, I had to bite my tongue too.
Okay, so we have another question from Megan. Out of all of the books that Liesel stole, which one sounds the best, and would you read any of them?
I'm not sure I would read the Grave Digger's Handbook. it brings to mind what was happening in her life, and I can totally understand why she would have wanted to read that. But I might be interested in some of the other ones. The shoulder shrug is mentioned so often that I think it would be interesting to see what that's about more. I mean, we know parts, but we don't know everything about the books that she read. And then she was reading The Whistler. I think it would be interesting. I might feel like I'm more a part of this book by reading some of those other books. So how about you, Laura?
I love when books include fictional books in their text. And there are actually a lot of other YA books that are doing this right now. So John Green in The Fault in Our Stars talks about an imperial affliction, which is a book within a book. And I mean, fans have now been demanding that he actually write this book. So I really, really like that Marcus Zusak did this in his book. And there are actually YA authors that have gone back and written books that were included as just elements of their previous books. So an example is Rainbow Roll. She wrote a book called Fangirl, and in it had sections of this Harry Potter book mimic called Carry On, Simon Snow. And then she went on later, this past fall actually, to publish Carry On, which is the Simon Snow story from Fangirl. So I really like that. And I agree with what Brooke said. I think I would want to read The Whistler, because kind of like the murder mystery intrigue, and I think it was set in Vienna. That just sounds like something that would be really interesting. And I also want to know how, I haven't read a whole lot of murder mysteries, so a murder mystery from the 1940s versus one now, I would be interested in the differences.
Yeah, I think that would be really fun too. That was on my list as well.
Okay, so we have a couple other responses to the question about Rudy's importance in Liesel's life. Brooke says that Rudy kept Liesel sane, and that's why he's important.
Yes, I think so too. And I love that quote where it says, perhaps it was Rudy who kept her sane with the stupidity of his talk, his lemon-soaked hair, and his cockiness. I just love that quote.
Yeah, and we also have a response to Rosa's relationship evolution with Liesel. Brooke says that in the beginning, Rosa was harsher and treated Liesel like she wasn't worth anything, but near the end, Rosa was still harsh but seemed warmer towards Liesel when Max came.
Yeah, and I remember the first time she saw Rosa look tender was when Max came, and she's standing on the steps or standing in the doorway and looks and says, who are these people? Is this Hans and Rosa? She really sees a change, and then she feels it and experiences it too. So I agree. Anything else there, Laura?
Let's see.
I don't want to talk over anybody.
No. Brooke responded to our follow-up question about the feathers and why Max is related to a bird. So Brooke says because he resembled a bird by leaving the trouble behind, so kind of like flew away from his troubles.
Flying away.
My thoughts on that, I also think of birds as being very delicate. And Max has kind of been described as a very delicate character, just very twig-like and frail and, not able to eat much. And then also you think of something like a caged bird.
Yes.
Which is what he is right really now. And good. So his lack of health and his kind of deteriorating condition really reminds you of a bird that isn't able to escape.
Right, and how he's so frail that they decide he can't stay in the basement. He's going to have to be by the fire at night, and all of that. So I saw him as very, very frail and barely alive much of this section of the book.
We're coming up on the end of our chat time. So if you have any last questions you want to ask, and then I have one question that I want to ask everyone out of my own personal interest.
I'm gonna leave you one to think about even after it closes, before Laura asks her final one, and then maybe we'll get some comments in between. That's that Liesel's love of books transforms her life and even the lives of those around her. So just something to think about, and I'm going to think about it too. The books that have inspired me transformed me. So what has inspired you, or at least impacted your life in a significant way in terms of books? So something to think about. there's so much more about this book that I could comment on and say. So I'm going to have to reread it all over again. I know Laura said she's read it, 4 times now? So I've read like 1.5. So I'm going to reread and see what things strike me that I never did notice before. Anything else there?
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions that we can respond to, and we'll go just a couple minutes over 5 p.m. But Zach asked, do you like how the author includes parts of future parts of the book in the book? So I think his foreshadowing, all of those little asides.
I do. Sometimes they scare me. Sometimes I get excited and I can't wait to see what's going to happen. But it makes me want to. This was a page turner for me. You know, not all books are. Some books that I read I think they're really good and they really educate me and I learn a lot and I go someplace else. But as I'm reading, I have to, keep thinking, what am I going to? And this one, it was so easy to just keep turning the page and wanting to find out what happens. So I think that was part of it for me.
And then one more question for Megan. Do you like the way the author does snippets of what the part will be like beforehand? So, for example,
very similar.
Let's see, at the chapter that begins like the struggler.
And then the struggler part 2, and then the end of the struggler.
Yeah, where he says, or the standover man, featuring the accordionist, a promise keeper, a good girl, a Jewish fish spider, etc., etc.
Makes me curious. Sometimes I don't know what those things are, and sometimes I do. So sometimes I'll read something and think, oh, I think this is going to have this in this section, and so I'm guessing, but I don't know for sure. Other times I have no idea what this is going to be about. So the fist fighter, what is that going to be about? And then I find out. So I like that foreshadowing. I like that kind of hints and glimpses of what's to come. It makes me excited and makes me want to turn the page and find out more. So that kind of made this be a really fast page turner again for me.
Definitely. Okay, so I have one final question for everyone, and I'll put this up on Edmodo just because I want your opinions. This is the second book about World War II that we have read in Newfangled. The first one that we read was Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein, and that was about the 2 girls in the British Royal Air Force that were, one was a spy and one was a pilot. It's fantastic if you haven't read it yet. It's wonderful. But I know a lot of you didn't like that book, but which out of these 2 books do you like better so far? So do you like The Book Thief, or do you like Codename Verity, and or do you like both, and why? So I will have that posted up on Edmodo. Just a couple of quick announcements for everyone. Our next meeting is going to be next Thursday, March 17th at 4:30, from 4:30 to 5. And then we will be finishing up our discussion of The Book Thief at the Coeur d'Alene Public Library downtown by watching the film adaptation of The Book Thief. On Thursday, March 24th at 6 p.m. Gail, you're welcome to join us if you want to. You are so welcome to join us. And we're going to be starting the film at 6. We should wrap up watching the film around 8 o'clock, and then we'll have about a half hour of discussion afterwards. So plan to be there from 6 to 8:30 on Thursday, March 24th in the community room of the Coeur d'Alene Public Library.
Oh, you guys, what fun. Reading has changed my life, and I know it's changing yours too. So good for you guys for all being readers. That is amazing. Readers are the smartest and the most knowledgeable, and they can go anywhere and do anything. So, and you write better too when you read a lot.
All really great things. Well, thank you so much, Gail, for joining us.
Thank you.
And
this was really
we're
fun.
So happy to have you, and so glad that you enjoyed the book.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of this. It was really great. All done?
Great. Oh, yeah. And we'll just hit that stop broadcast button.